G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder with Mags, and welcome back to the 1.75 dev server. And today, as I promised, we're going to be taking a look at some of the top-end French tanks that are currently on display on the dev server. Now we've got quite a bit to cover, so we're going to get straight into it. First up, the AMX-50. The AMX-50 is easily one of the most identifiable French tank designs following World War II. So first, a little bit of history on the design. Following World War II, the French found themselves with a military that was woefully undergeared, for obvious reasons. With tensions in Germany already back on the rise between Allied and Soviet forces, it became very apparent that the French military needed to get themselves some new designs very, very quickly. As a result, a whole series of tank designs were started, and the AMX-50 was among them. The AMX-50 is a heavy tank design that features an autoloader and an oscillating turret. Now the reason for the oscillating turret is to keep the autoloader permanently in line with the gun. Previous attempts at autoloading designs resulted in the problem of the turret and the gun needing to align itself with the loader between shell shots, forcing the tank to have to pull its weapon away from a potential target in order to reload the gun. With an oscillating turret, the gun doesn't actually change angle inside of the turret. Instead, the entire turret changes angle, and the autoloader mounted in the rear section of the turret can directly feed the shells in regardless of where the gun is aiming. Sadly, as fantastic as the AMX-50 looks, it was a failed design. Only 5 prototypes were ever built, including the final hull that would have been the production version, with the primary reasons for the cancellation of the project being the tank itself getting too heavy for what the French were actually looking for, and the project being both behind on time and over on budget. In War Thunder, the AMX-50 comes in at rank 5, battle rating 7.7, and is armed with a 120mm SA-46 cannon. This is an auto-loading cannon with a maximum of 38 shots. It's also equipped with 4 76mm smoke grenade launchers and a 7.5mm AAT-52 machine gun with 3,000 rounds. Turret rotation speed is a respectable 21 degrees per second. Vertical guidance is -6 degrees depression to 13 degrees elevation with a fire rate of 8 shots per minute. That is 7.5 seconds between shots on the autoloader. The reload time of the magazine for the autoloader itself is 50 seconds. Hull armour is 60mm at the front, 30mm to sides and 30mm to rear, with the turret armour having 90mm at the front, 60 to the sides and 40mm to the rear. In total, the tank comes in at 57.8 tonnes with an 850 horsepower engine at 2,800 RPM and a maximum speed of 51 km per hour, which I can confirm it can actually hit. Although practical speeds on most terrain will be around 40 to 45. The AMX-50 is also pretty good on slopes with a maximum inclination of 41 degrees. Now, she has 2 shell types available, both are unlocked as default. The first is a 120mm armor-piercing solid shot. Muzzle velocity is 1,067 meters per second with a 23 kilogram projectile mass. At 10 meters, 303mm of penetration, 302mm at 100mm, going out to 286 at 500 and out to 267mm at 1,000 meters. The second shell is pure HE. This HE shell weighs 23 kilograms, has a 762 meter per second muzzle velocity, and a TNT equivalent of 4.65 kilograms. 39mm of penetration across the board with this one. So, moving on from the AMX-50, we go to the AMX-50 Foch. The AMX-50 Foch, as you may guess, is an offshoot of the development of the AMX-50 prototype. The idea was to build a low-cost, low-slung tank destroyer that used common components with the AMX-50 to operate as a fire support vehicle for AMX-50s while in the field. And once again, the French took inspiration from their former enemies, the Germans, with the Foch's primary influence being that of the German Jagdpanther. The AMX-50 Foch once again comes in at rank 5, battle rating 7.7, and it features the same 120mm SA-46 cannon as the AMX-50, however this time without an autoloader, with a maximum ammo count of 48. It also features a secondary weapon in the form of an MG-151-15 machine gun with 500 rounds of ammunition. Cannon's reverse speed is 4.2 degrees per second with 6 degrees of depression and 16 degrees of elevation, and a reload speed of 19.4 seconds with a stock crew. Hull armour is 180mm at the front, 40 to the sides and 40 to the rear, and in total the tank comes in at 58 tonnes with a 1000 horsepower engine at 2,800 RPM, giving it a maximum speed of 50 km per hour or around 40 to 45 on most terrains, and a maximum inclination of 41 degrees. Now, as you may imagine, with the same gun comes the same ammunition, with the AMX-50 Foch using exactly the same 120mm AP round and exactly the same 120mm HE round as its bigger brother, the AMX-50. On the test server, both of these tanks performed exceptionally well, although the test server is an artificial environment, so I reserve judgment on both these vehicles until they hit the live server. So, next up we have the AMX-13 Hot, and it's perhaps one of the more curious vehicles that I've seen in the tech tree so far. The AMX-13 began its development in 1946 as an air-portable light tank to support paratroopers. Now, it was designed under a variation of the same project as the AMX-50, with France's need to rapidly upgrade its own military capabilities. However, unlike the AMX-50, the AMX-13 was quite a success. Production of the tank began in 1952, with most of the units intended for them having received their vehicles by no later than 1960, and production continuing all the way till 1985. Now, with such a long service life, you would expect there to be upgrades to each of these vehicles, which is why there is quite the number of AMX-13s present inside of the War Thunder tech tree for France. What's particularly interesting about the AMX-13 Hot, however, is the gun. The original AMX-13 started out with a 75mm auto-loading cannon. As time progressed, the AMX-13 was upgunned twice, first from a 75mm to a 90mm cannon, and then at a later date, the final version of the tank was upgraded to a 105mm smoothbore gun. Alongside these cannon upgrades, the AMX-13 also received unguided rocket pods, and at a later date was upgraded with wire-guided anti-tank missiles, which is what we see here, the Hot missile system. Which is where my surprise at the AMX-13 began. The AMX-13 Hot is rank 6 battle rating 9.0, however it's only armed with the original 75mm SA-50L57 cannon, with 36 shots of ammunition. That is because light tank is not the role that the AMX-13 Hot is playing at battle rating 9. At battle rating 9, this is France's anti-tank guided missile tank destroyer. Alongside the 75mm auto-loading cannon, it features 6 Hot anti-tank guided missiles with no reloads, a 76mm smoke grenade launcher, and a 7.5mm Mach 31 machine gun with 4,950 rounds of ammunition. Now, in this situation, it's worth remembering that the 75mm cannon is actually the secondary weapon, with the Hot ATGMs being the primary weapon of this vehicle. Turret rotation speed is 21 degrees per second, with 6 degrees of gun depression and 13 degrees of gun elevation, and 12 shots per minute out of the autoloader. That's a 5-second reload time between shots. When the autoloader's drum magazine runs dry, it takes 45 seconds to exchange it. Hull armour is 40mm at the front, 20 at the sides and 15 to the rear, with turret armour also being 40mm to the front, 20 to the sides and 20 to the rear. Mass of the AMX-13 Hot is 15.5 tonnes with a 270 horsepower engine at 3,199 RPM, giving it a maximum speed on paper of 60 km an hour, but a practical speed in War Thunder matches of between extremely high 40s to mid 50s depending on terrain type. Maximum inclination is 41 degrees, so we can go up some pretty steep slopes, and it is very agile and very mobile overall. Now, the 75mm gun comes with 4 shell types. The primary shell that you will get as default is the Pot 51A. This is an APC, or an armor-piercing cap shell. It's 6.4kg shell with a muzzle velocity of 1,000 meters per second, 168mm of penetration at 10 meters, 163 at 100 meters, 140 at 500, and 110 at 1,000 meters. Now, the second shell that is available by default is a 75mm HE shell. This is a 6.2kg projectile with a maximum velocity of 753 meters per second and an explosive mass equivalent of 675 grams. Carries 10mm of penetration across the board. Now, there is only one unlockable shell for the gun, and this is the PCOT-51P armor-piercing capped ballistic cap shell. Again, we're looking at a 6.4kg projectile with 1,000 meters per second muzzle velocity. However, this time we got 180mm of penetration at 10 meters, down to 176 at 100 meters, 163 at 500 meters, and still maintaining 150mm of penetration at 1,000 meters. And then we come to the primary weapon system that this tank will be used for, the Hot Missile System, ATGM, Anti-Tank Guided Missile. This is a 26kg missile moving at 240 meters per second, 3.93 kilograms of TNT equivalent, and 800mm of penetration at all ranges, down to 692mm of penetration at 60 degrees, and still maintaining almost 400mm of penetration at 30. So, how did this tank perform on the test server? Well, once again, the test server is not a proper gaming environment, so I reserve judgment. However, it worked better than you would expect. Obviously, the ATGMs are devastating. They basically one-hit anything that they hit. With 400mm of penetration, even at extreme angles, it almost always takes out the tank that you target. But surprisingly, the gun also wasn't worthless. While The default shell is rubbish, there's no really other way to put it. The shell that you unlock has high enough penetration that, providing you use good flanking tactics, is capable of getting through the side and rear armour of most of the main battle tanks that you will be encountering. And the AMX-13 itself is small enough, light enough, fast enough and nimble enough that it is very capable of getting into those good flanking positions. Once there, with a 5-second reload time between shots, you can put the hurt on a target very quickly, and as a result, the AMX-13 HOT, despite having the worst gun on paper, was actually the most fun I had on the test server for the entire time that I was there. And last but not least, we come to the big one, the AMX-30B2. Now, I was going to delve into the full history of this tank, but in the time frame that I actually have in this video, this thing has a complicated history that will take quite some time to fully get into. In the most basic terms I can bring across, it looks like a Leopard, and that is because at the time the AMX-30 was being developed, the Leopard was also being developed, and both tanks were built to the same design requirements for a new main battle tank for NATO forces. While Germany and a large number of NATO allies, including Australia, took on the Leopard, France, for political and internal reasons, went for the AMX-30. So, in the French Tree and War Thunder, there are actually two AMX-30 tanks. There's the AMX-30 and the AMX-30B2. The original AMX-30 had a few design issues very early on that needed to be addressed. The B2 was the tank that addressed those, and when the B2 came into service, all previous AMX-30 models were upgraded to B2 standard. In-game, it comes in at rank 6, battle rating 8.7, and is armed with a 105mm CN105 F1 cannon with 47 shots. It also has a 20mm M693 automatic cannon with 1,000 rounds, 4 76mm smoke grenade launchers, and a 7.62mm AAN F1 machine gun with 2,000 rounds. Turret rotation speed is 21 degrees per second, 8 degrees depression, 20 degrees of elevation, which is fantastic. Reload time is 11.1 seconds, with 79mm of frontal hull armour, 35 to the sides and 30 to the rear, and 80mm of frontal turret armour, 41 to the sides and 30 to the rear. It's a 37-ton tank with a 720 horsepower engine at 2,400 RPM, giving it a maximum speed of 65 km an hour. It will hit 55 reliably on War Thunder terrain, and a maximum inclination of 36 degrees. So how does it drive? Well, it drives like a Leopard. It does have one noticeable weakness, however. You'll notice the size of that commander's cupola. That is going to come over the top of every single ridgeline, and while I was facing these tanks on the test server, I was easily able to destroy them by putting pretty much any armor penetrating shell that I had available into that commander's cupola and letting the shell sprawl through the inside of the turret. So that is going to be a problem with the tank, but it does make up for it in some of its shell options. So, the default round for the 30B2 is a OCC 105 F1 heat round. That's heat, not heat FS. It's an 11 kilo shell, 1,000 meters per second, carries a TNT equivalent of 1.02 kilograms, and maintains 360 millimeters of penetration on flat armor through all ranges. It's actually a pretty good shell. It doesn't quite have the explosive potential or velocity of the Leopard's heat FS shell, but it's still not bad nonetheless. Second shell up is a high explosive shell. Nothing particularly special here. It's 12 kilograms, 700 meters per second, 2 kilograms explosive mass, and 25 millimeters penetration. Pretty standard for the tier. And third up, we have a 105 millimeter smoke shell. Again, nothing particularly special, although very useful to have available. But the one we really want to talk about is this one, the OFL 105 F1 APFSDS, armor-piercing, fin-stabilized, discarding sabot. 3.6 kilogram shell. 1,525 meters per second, 442 millimeters of penetration at 10 meters, and still maintains 408 millimeters of penetration at 2,000 meters. To put this into perspective, the current king of kinetic penetration in War Thunder is the KPZ-70, and it only has 380 millimeters of penetration at 10 meters and can only maintain 315 at 2,000. On the test server, it didn't matter what I shot at, it didn't matter what angle I shot at it, it penetrated every single time, and almost always one shot. It was lethal. So that's how the AMX-30B2 makes up for the enormous commander's cupola, by having the single most powerful kinetic shell in the game, hands down. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for watching. I hope you found it informative. As always, remember to hit that video description down below for links to my Patreon and links to my social media, and if you liked the video, remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you want to check out more on the channel and you haven't already, and until next time, drive smart, drive safe, and I'll catch you on the battlefield.